وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا.
Allah sent His messenger to call people to eternal success. And that is why Muslims in Norway are now establishing a masjid and dawah center to enhance the Norwegian dawah. But they cannot do this alone. We need to support them. If you donate to this cause, you will inshallah reap the rewards of thousands of Muslims coming back to Islam. So click the link and donate now and share the video for extra reward.
Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. Welcome to another episode of our Ramadan series, where we debunk the baseless allegations and falsehoods about Islam spread on the internet. Today's episode is a little different because it is about someone who claims to be a Muslim, yet he's openly working against Islam. This individual claims to have the true understanding of the Quran and is actively leading people astray, telling us that every scholar for the last 1400 years got the basic concept of Tawheed wrong. According to him, the entire Ummah are mushrikun because we follow the Hadith, which is a very, very strange statement. Here's a snippet of one of his videos where he explains this in the light of an ayah from the Quran. See for yourself and we will respond in kind.
You said Islam cannot be practiced without adding the garbage hadith you have invented, because to you something has to be pertinent to the Islam of God before you can be satisfied. When the name of God alone is called, you don't like it. Quran chapter 39 verse 45. You are disgusted by it. So you in turn become a mushrik. I don't care whether you call yourself a Sunni, Shia, Tijaniya.
He's citing verse 45 of Surah Az-Zumar, which translates as, "Yet when Allah alone is mentioned, the hearts of those who disbelieve in the hereafter are filled with disgust. But as soon as those gods other than Him are mentioned, they are filled with joy." Akhi Mohammed Hijab, it's a pleasure having you here today. What would you say to this weird accusation?
Well, the thing is, I think we have to start off with what the Quran says itself. I mean, these people who say that they reject the Hadith, I would say they're actually rejecting the Quran itself, because the Quran makes it very clear in many, many verses that the Quran wants us to follow Allah and the Messenger. And it even explains how. So we'll start with the most generic verses. We know that. وَأَطِيعُ اللَّهُ وَأَطِيعُ الرَّسُولِ. We have these many verses that say something to the effect of that, which is that obey Allah and obey the Messenger. But how do you obey the Messenger? It's essentially operationally impossible to obey the Messenger if there is no preserved record of what he said, did, or agreed with. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect is there's a very interesting verse in Surah Al-Nahl in chapter number 16, verse number 43, where Allah mentions that we have sent to you the dhikr لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهim, that to show the people what has been sent down to them. Now, this is very important for the following reason, right? You have two things that are mentioned in the Quran, in that particular surah, in that particular ayah. Number one is that Allah sent down a dhikr. And we know dhikr is the Quran here. Yes. We have sent down the dhikr. لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهim. And then you have another aspect here, is you doing tabyin, you doing clarification, you doing an expounding of what has been revealed.
Yes.
So you have two aspects here which are preserved and part of Islam. According to the Quran, you have that which is the Quran itself, and number two, you have the tabyin, or the clarification and the explanation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You also have a verse in Surah Al-Ahzab where Allah mentions, because someone could argue, a counter argument to this could be, well, a dhikr here is only the Quran. Okay. And this, we're talking about one part of the Quran, maybe explaining another, something like this, some ba'id, some far away tafsir. Okay, well, imagine this. In the Quran, Allah now is instructing the mothers of the believers, who are the wives of the Prophet. وَاذْكُرْنَ مَا يُتْلَى فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Okay, this is a verse in Surah Al-Ahzab. وَاذْكُرْنَ مَا يُتْلَى فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. You have two things, ayatullah or ayatullah. You have which are the ayat Quran. Okay, well, hikmah. So there's something else called hikmah.
Yes.
So what's interesting here is that Allah is mentioning that in your houses, mothers of the believers, there are two things that are mentioned, and they are mentioned independently. Number one is ayatullah, which is the Quranic verses, and number two is al-hikmah. Al-hikmah is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Someone could argue, well, one is the other. The hikmah is, in fact, the ayatullah. But in Arabic language, it's something. There's a principle that says, al-atfu yaqtadi al-mughayara. Al-atfu, a conjunction necessitates differentiation. Conjunction is when you have like the word and, for example. It's a conjunction, right? So wa in this verse is a conjunction. You're putting two things together. When you have and you have two different concepts, one of them has to be different from the other. Otherwise, you have a tautological concept.
Yeah.
Which means that according to the Quran, there are two things that have been preserved. Two things which are mentioned in houses, mentioned as remembrance, mentioned as guidance, mentioned as clarifications. You have the Quran and you have the hikmah and the sunnah.
Yes.
So this is why I say the Quran alone, they fall into kufr akbar, which is yukhrij sahibuhu min al-millah. It's the kind of kufr akbar which takes the person outside of the fold and the pale of Islam, because they have not just rejected the hadith and the Prophet, they have rejected the Quran itself. Very clear verses of the Quran, many verses of the Quran telling you to follow the Prophet. وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُ. Whatever the Prophet ﷺ told you to do, then do it. Whatever he told you not to do, then don't do it. Once again, their position makes this operationally impossible, because it is tantamount to saying that Allah has not preserved his religion. And you could actually make a subsidiary argument on this point, which is that, okay, well, how is the Quran preserved? The Quran is preserved according to Ibn Jazari, which is probably the foremost authority on these matters, through a triangulation process. Number one, through Al-Khatt al-Uthmani, which is the script, the Quranic script. The main thing is obviously memorization. And the third one is the Arabic language. And so when you think about how, it's the chain of narration. The chain of narration. Okay, the Quran has a chain of narration. Yes. No problem. So if the Quran is preserved through a chain of narration, the Hadith is also preserved through a chain of narration. That's why their position is not only theologically defunct, but it's also historically inaccurate. Because actually, the preservation of the Hadith is, especially with the Sahih Hadith and the Mutawatir Hadith, etc., these kinds of that rank of it, there is no marker of differentiation between how this is preserved and how that is preserved. They're both preserved through the chains of narration. For example, the hadith, "Man kadhaba alayya muta'ammidan falyatabawa maq'adahu min an-nar." Whoever lies about me intentionally, let him prepare his seat in the hellfire. This hadith alone has been preserved and narrated by some, say, 43 people. 43 individuals. Some say 100 people, over 100 people have narrated the same hadith. There are some verses of the Quran which have not been narrated by 100 people.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
So if you're going to throw away the Quran, if you're going to throw away the hadith, because you, in your estimation, it's not been preserved to a high enough standard, then you will have to, by that standard, from a historical and academic perspective, throw away verses of the Quran.
Yes.
So there's no reason for you to have this position. Okay, there is no reason for you to have this position. It would seem to me that these individuals have this position not due to some historical or theological reason, but due to modernism, due to liberalism.
Oh, you say that?
Because a lot of the hadith have aspects which they are very uncomfortable with, and they've become weakened due to the social milieu.
Basically, they just don't like the content of it.
Yes.
So they want to.
They want any excuse to
reject
get rid
it.
of the hadith.
Yeah.
But that shows you that they are people of weak faith. And in
Yes.
fact, the Prophet predicted in the end of times that people will be rejecting the hadith.
Hold on for a second. You still want those incredible rewards, right? So make sure you click the link below and you donate for the Mega Masjid project.
This is a hadith, which is so interesting, that there will be, in the end of times, this is one of the signs of the Day of Judgment. This man is a manifestation of the signs of the Day of Judgment. That on the Day of Judgment, before the Day of Judgment, there will be people who will be reclining on chairs and saying that I only follow what the Quran says, and not the hadith. And so you see, I'm sorry to say, people who believe this, you cannot marry them. If you're a proper mainstream Sunni Muslim, you cannot marry someone who is rejecting the hadith, whether you're a man or a woman. You cannot eat from their meat if they slaughtered the meat. They are not Islamic. We cannot consider them to be Muslims.
So what do you think is the solution now? Because this trend is actually growing a lot. You have famous individuals coming out and claiming that hadith, you don't have to follow it. It's inauthentic. It's not preserved. We have the general understanding of the seerah. Yes, we take benefit from it, but it's not preserved correctly. So we don't need to adhere to it. we just follow the Quran. What should we do with this rising fitna? What do you think
We
is
have
the
to
solution
challenge
for
it
that?
head on.
Yes.
And this is a clear marker of differentiation between Islam and Kufr.
Yes.
And even the Quran mentions this. We mentioned the Hadith. The Quran mentions this.
Yes.
الَّذِينَ يُفَرِّقُونَ بَيْنَ اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ.
Subhanallah.
The ones who try and differentiate between Allah and His messengers.
Yes.
They try and separate between Allah and His messengers.
Yeah.
This is something unacceptable. Okay, this is one of the weakest positions you can take theologically about Islam as a
Yes.
religion. And so that has to be exposed. The arguments that I put forward today,
Yeah.
showing the kinds of verses that I mentioned today, the one in Surah Al-Nahl, the one in
Yes.
Surah Al-Ahzab, there's many other verses, the ones in Surah Al-Nisa, the ones in Surah Al-Hadid, the ones in Surah Al-Hashar, for example. All these verses that we've mentioned, collate them.
Yes.
Say, how do you explain? Whatever explanation they give is not going to be satisfactory, number
Yeah.
one. Number two, then the argument from preservation, that the preservation of the hadith
Yeah.
is not dissimilar from the preservation of the Quran, especially on those hadith which are mutawatir.
Yes.
And so the argument from the hadith. And then thirdly, to show in the Quran the attitude and the sentiment in the Quran towards those who try and separate between Allah and the
Yeah,
Messenger.
yeah.
I think with those three things, if someone is still insistent on their position, then quite frankly, we should not include them as part of the Muslims.
Yeah. So this individual is clearly just taking a verse from the Quran
Yes.
and just twisting the meaning. Nowhere does the Quranic verse state that if you believe in the hadith that you're a mushrik. That's just ridiculous.
pathetic.
No one believes in that.
pathetic,
So I don't think these people deserve our attention, but we have to address these doubts anyway, so no one gets affected by them. And
Yes.
since we are seeing, in the light of modernism and liberalism,
yes.
people rejecting these kinds of, rejecting the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it is vital that we, brothers and sisters, I'm talking to you guys now,
Yes.
it is vital that we create series like this one, series where we are debunking these kinds of false claims and allegations against Islam, where we are defending the Prophet ﷺ, his Sunnah, his tradition. Without his tradition, we would have no Islam. Brothers and sisters, this work is crucial, and alhamdulillah, it is happening because of your generous support. This studio was built by your support. This whole masjid in Islam,
Yeah.
the Islamnet masjid that we are in right
Yes.
now, recording this Ramadan series, it was built by your generous support. And we have a long way to go to complete the project, and we still need your support to keep producing this kinds of content and to continue to produce quality content. Alhamdulillah, we recently built the studio. We recently purchased these professional cameras, this professional equipment, and all of this is a sadaqah jariyah for every single one of you who donated towards this project.
Me speaking about what I've just spoken about, you asking what you just asked, every single thing that I've just said, using these instruments, will go to their, subhanAllah, the bank of good deeds.
Yes.
Because the Prophet said, "Ad-dallu ala al-khayri kafa'ilihi." The one who leads to the good is like the one who done the good.
Yes.
SubhanAllah.
So I think, brothers and sisters, if you still want to have a share in this tremendous work, and this is, inshallah, just the beginning.
Yes.
This is the beginning of something huge. The work will expand, inshallah, and the production will increase, and the quality of the production will keep increasing. We have very few top-notch Islamic series being produced in the world.
To be honest, yes. You're
Very
right.
few.
Yes, you're right.
And we want to take the level of production to that
want to, yes.
top-notch level, and that cannot be done without your
It's
support.
impossible. It's impossible.
So, brothers and sisters, this is a magnificent opportunity for you this Ramadan to be part of something great, to be part of something historical, inshallah ta'ala. By giving your sadaqah, everyone will be donating in Ramadan anyway,
I
right?
think they've heard enough. I think they're now what they're doing now after they've heard your speech.
Yes.
Is they've actually now they're already in the process of scrolling down.
Yeah.
They've started putting their cursor or their thumb on the link, and they
Yes.
just pause our video right now.
Yes.
Because it just takes a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
And they're already just because they know 20, 30 seconds, subhanAllah, it could be worth so much in terms of ajr.
Yeah.
It'll make them feel so good that they've done the purification of sadaqah in Ramadan. They'll feel so good about themselves. I cannot imagine that they would want to forego an opportunity like this.
Yeah.
They're already clicking the link. I mean, they're decent people. They'll do.
I know, because everyone knows that sadaqah extinguishes sins just as water extinguishes fire, and everyone is seeking the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these blessed days of Ramadan, and this is one of the best ways you can do it.
Yes.
Click the link and donate now. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. See you in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.